I've been
I'm retired.
I'm back.
As Temley will attest to, I've been up late a lot of nights trying to come up with the words to say at something like this. I actually have something I put together if you want to hear it. I'm truly moved. I mean, I'm fighting back the tears. I truly am. Just the number of people here, the distribution of the years, and look at the shirts and things like that. You really, I mean, the scholarship, the honor there is just. I mean, I don't want to say I don't deserve that, because I don't want to. I mean, that's. It's not that. It's just that I'm just so humbled by your presence and by your thoughts. So, if you'll indulge me, this will take a few minutes, but I wanted to tell you a story, if that's okay. So I'm going to step out of my comfort zone and read off a script tonight. I've never done this in my life. That's a true story. True story. I hate podiums. I thought we were going to have a podium, so forget I said that. I don't want to be too serious or too trivial, but now you have my attention, or I have your attention, and with full realization that I can't be fired anymore, here goes. I'd like to start off by saying thank you. I mean that from the bottom of my heart for all of you being here today. Thank you, Teresa, for spearheading this gathering, to my colleagues for being here, my friends, former students and current students, for the kind words, for the interesting comments. You know I love a good jab. You know I love a good story. I'd also like to thank NVIDIA stock, which has enabled me to be here as well. Most of all, I'd like to thank God, my parents, my beautiful wife, Tenley, our awesome kids, without whom I would never have had the courage or the support to come here in the first place. I've been blessed beyond measure and far beyond deserving. God bestowed on me a great love of all things weather. He made me a nerd. He brought me out of childhood blindness that most doctors said was not possible. He gave me a desire to learn, a drive to succeed, and just enough aptitude to be dangerous. My mom, Carol, God rest her soul, she just passed several weeks back, was always home waiting for us after school when the until the streetlights came on. Until a few years ago, she would still ask me if Notre Dame had any openings. True story. She loved saying the plot thickens. Most of all, she loved her grandkids and great-grandkids. My brother and I know full well that we were simply conduits for her to get to them. My dad, Lee, worked himself up from being a junior engineer to vice president of a steel company, despite never having had a college degree until 3 years before he retired. His example of work ethic and dedication were not lost on me. To him, we've always done it this way was not a vision, it was an excuse. He loved the Packers, so I'm truly named after a quarterback, not a Simpson. He had many silly quotes, like singing "Oh Mine Papa" when he was making popcorn. I know he's up there, I still can't figure it out. Or when you give him a gift, he'd say, "Thank you for your hospitalization." I miss them both dearly. As a young kid, I witnessed their strength and courage in dealing with the racial and anti-Catholic turmoil of the late 60s in Mississippi, where we lived for about 5 years following his job transfer down there. It was a tough number of years for many reasons. A few years later, back in Wisconsin, I was exhibiting superior athletic prowess, as I was wont to do. During a 5th grade PE kickball game, I broke a school window. It's only because the center fielder was a klutz. Sent to the principal's office, I was told that I, quote, was an idiot and you will never amount to anything. Keep in mind I was in 5th grade. I almost real test of this. I almost sent him a copy of my PhD years later. Such experiences instilled in me empathy, a firm sense of right and wrong, that compromise is not always the best path forward, and that patience with a lack of effort or sound judgment is not necessarily a virtue. Tenley put her successful career on hold to make sure our kids had the best possible environment in which to grow up. Our house was the neighborhood gathering place, full of love because she was there. She held down the fort all those weeks every spring in my absence, and storms here not only made me frustrated, but it made her life especially interesting because ironically, she's very afraid. She's very afraid of severe storms. Forgive me. I've been blessed to know several other great people who were instrumental in shaping who I am, and forgive me for the diatribe, but I think it's important. Father Melvin Tracy was a science teacher at my boarding high school, JFK Prep. Students lived there Sunday evening through Friday afternoon. It was a really unique experience. And we went home on buses on weekends. My parents sacrificed much sending me there, but they valued the education and the good match and place that it was for me. And that may have been why I came to a place like Valpo, because truthfully, when the job opening came here, I had no idea even where the heck it was. Truly. It was there at JFK where 5 guys from various racial backgrounds crammed into an oversized dorm room we called the barn, remembered to this day. Taught us more about life than 50 HR modules ever could. Anyway, Father Melvin taught us way more than science. He installed values like faith, family, hard work. He led us in building an eco-house, a revolutionary idea at the time. I learned much from the experience, including the potential of renewable energy, as well as that I was certainly not a roofer. Dr. Lyle Horn was my undergraduate advisor and a professor at UW, voice of reason and common sense and good counsel. Every program needs one such as him. He even convinced Tenley to take Met 103 right when we started dating. It was there called Met 100 because it wasn't as hard. Get a few more drinks down me and I'll spill some stories on that. My grad advisor, and this goes to one of Teresa's comments, my grad advisor was Dr. Don Johnson. Remember that name? Dr. Don Johnson, we called him DRJ, but we never called him Don. Never. Those of us who were blessed to work with him, and many of you know, Russ Schneider or Louis Mussolini, some of the great giants of our field. I feel like a black sheep. Nonetheless, one of the 33 PhDs I think he turned out was a strong, quiet, and demanding scientist who, much like a great coach, always brought out the best in everyone he mentored. He never accepted anything other than your best, ever. A valuable lesson I hope we never lose sight of. My favorite DRJ saying was, take some courage pills. I put that advice to the test one year when I wrote the graduate student group's skit for our annual solstice party, in which I played Don Johnson, except this time for Miami Vice. I almost lost my RA that year. Dr. Gene Rasmussen was an esteemed University of Maryland scientist, a friend of DRJ, and like him, an AMS president. He provided the gravitas to my original ideas with our administration in those early years. It was not easy getting buy-in here for what I was thinking about, for what I was trying to do, but Gene had my back, and on a few occasions even made trips here to meet with the Kretzmann folks to urge support. None of us would be here without him. Funny thing is, I had his daughter in Met 103 in the very early years and didn't realize it. She wasn't very good at science. But at least she didn't tell her dad that I was mean. So I almost never got here. Some of these things have been alluded to, and so forgive me, but Valpo's MET program was officially approved in 1991, spinning off from a long-standing and well-respected GEO program. The NSF recommended Valpo hire a meteorologist, so the following year a half-time position was advertised. One of my grad office colleagues at the time was tentatively selected, only to be told sorry shortly thereafter when the position was cut due to so-called transformation. By 1993, the position was reannounced as full-time. Even though it was very intriguing to me, I had accepted a radar job in Norman just prior to the position coming to my attention. Thank goodness my would-be supervisor, Dr. Tim Crum, gave me the green light to give the process here a go and keep in touch if things didn't work out. I still sometimes wonder what the hell I was thinking back then. Apparently the administration didn't even want me, but rather a candidate that had experience at the National Hurricane Center, who they may not have realized I knew and had worked with in the past. The students advocated for me, and Valpo's paid the price for decades. And by the way, the faculty member at Wisconsin that was previously mentioned, Dr. John Martin, was their third candidate, but since he was at the University of Washington at the time, they didn't want to fly him in. We've had conversations. Finally, my passion met purpose. Consultant fee paid. I've always had an insatiable drive to teach. I TA'd at least 6 courses while at the UW and developed at least another baker's dozen here. Meteorology was especially rewarding to me, for me to teach because of my love of weather and seeing others get excited about it. And unlike what's too prevalent in some corners of higher education today, the radar equation does not care about your feelings. There are absolute truths, even if we haven't discovered them all yet. My initial campus home, as previously discussed, was a place called Cronky Hall. Dust and mold woofing off the office shades greeted my arrival on campus. Soon thereafter, a roof leak prompted the dean's office to inform me that I'd have to pay for the next computer monitor that wasn't protected by a dust cover. There were termites in the walls, and 85-degree air-conditioned classrooms added to the charm. I learned the critical importance of who sorted the mail, as John has already alluded to, and remembering to shut off the Weather Center fax machine at night to save energy. There were phone calls from a local named Don.
Donald Leroy Wright.
Donald Leroy Wright, and God rest his soul. Ron Yankee, the chairman at the time, saw fit to give this person my home phone number. I won't even go there. Then there were the Evening 103 lab garbage can basketball games with the lab aides. A few years later, our football coach came knocking on my door with a tape measure. And he was literally measuring for drapes. Apparently, we were moving. The early days were crazy. Tenley and I came here with a 1-year-old. 2 more would come by 1998. The funniest thing I remember from those days was when Tenley delivered our second child in 1995. The nurse asked, "What are you going to name him?" "Bryce," she replied. "Oh, after Bryce Drew," the nurse questioned. "Bryce who?" Tenley said. The coffee would have come out of my nose had I not been busy at the time. I maintained high expectations for the students in the program to be the very best we could be. I gave my best to those who entrusted their education to us and had similarly high expectations of them. A pat on the back when earned, a kick in the butt when needed. To serve as their facilitator in discovery, motivator in pursuit, and even the face of reality if their God-given skill set didn't mesh with their initial academic desires. I mean, I'd love to be a NASCAR driver, but as Detective Harry Callahan famously said, man's got to know his limitations. By the way, can I still say that, or is there a bias report or anything like that? I developed a curricular structure unlike the methodology in use at the time, met all 4 years, new kinds of classes, a marriage of theory and application throughout, and above all, personal responsibility. You earned what you got based on performance, not time spent or even on your effort. But not everything we tried, or I tried, was successful. Forgive me, it's almost over. For example, we had a short-lived broadcast meteorology program that had wonderful students, but it couldn't measure up to our quality standards. Proposals to establish a campus ROTC program failed before we finally got it approved. I've always tried to remember the immortal words of motivational speaker John Plutarski. Was it over when the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor? Well, it ain't over now. You gotta watch Animal House. Great movie. Office location notwithstanding, I found my greatest fulfillment in the classroom. Does anyone remember Life Lesson Fridays? Yes. The Bart talk. Commentary. The black or whiteboard eraser challenge. Or that was the name of my high school band, or my first album. Highly technical figures. Or the proof of the existence of God. Or Jeopardy. The group that would become Visit was the dream of most of the 10 or so majors who were here when I arrived. Telling I will never forget, as it was already been alluded to, Director Jared Geyer's early morning phone call exclaiming, "We gotta go." With a couple of sleeping babies at the time, I'm guessing Temley had a slightly different idea of where we should go than Jared had in mind. High risk indeed. After losing Crocky to the football program, Mueller Hall Substory was our next destination. If you can forecast without windows, you must be damn good. Life below grade and off the beaten trail can sharpen focus and determination, not to mention it provided a great place for my kids to ride scooters. But it sucked when someone would call asking for an explanation of the weather outside, which triggered a feverish run up the stairs to look. Also, and this will bring flashbacks for a few, inquiring minds want to know, why did they shampoo the carpets down there so much? Who ran up a $300 phone bill on the 1-900 line? Who put Winamp on the Weather Center computers? And what is this dialectizer website anyway? Why is a bird repeatedly interrupting my scintillating 8 a.m. thermal lecture by bashing into the windows? Who thought it was a good idea for me to sing On Wisconsin and Mueller 114 after the Badgers won the Rose Bowl? It's a wonder we survived those first 10 years. Facilities were not competitive, staffing was short. After all, if you lose Crocky to athletics and get sent to a basement, it's clear you're not exactly a high campus priority. But Christ College Dean Schwain offered frequent early morning encouragement, and I was joined by several great colleagues. And the enrollment kept growing. This growth and the need for reasonable above-ground abode provided the impetus for a late-night email to the provost outlining a proposal for what would later become KCH. Soon thereafter, a presentation to the board spouses, after which I met Jay Christopher, and the radar was hatched. And that, if you can catch a radar, that really must hurt. I served 2 terms as department chair, mostly because I was best for the department, not because I particularly was gifted at it or wanted to do it. I'm not a meetings kind of guy, and this not teaching, especially, we met 103. And delivering the news to a colleague that they could no longer continue with us was the single most difficult thing I had to do here. Still, I did briefly entertain the notion of pursuing positions in academic administration. But then I looked online at the betting sites, and the over-under on my survival in such a job was 34 minutes. And that was that. It was also during this period that I developed an appreciation for Johnny Paycheck, and that you haven't lived until you've contemplated quitting at least a dozen times. Through it all, the field studies were my baby. Severe storm fieldwork provides the ultimate learning experience, the ultimate environment, where application of classroom concepts combines with planning, teamwork, humility, and a lack of sleep. The ultimate game of cat and mouse with the atmosphere. Failure is not only an option, but too often it's the rule. You must learn from it. Do your prepping and science well, and you may see a great storm. Get lazy, lose attention to detail or situational awareness, and you get a sunburn, or worse. Some may remember the early years, the 1990s. When we used private vehicles complete with their optional air conditioner or vehicle manuals. As necessity is often the mother of invention, toilet came along. Thank you, John Gum and those associated. Later, a lump's parent donated monies that were used to purchase a Honda Pilot, and we were allowed to augment it with rented vans. Then came the RAM and portable radio sound system, and off we fly. But what's most important to me about the 46 trips over 26 years, the 275,000 plus miles, the nearly 17 months on the road, had little to do with science. Rather, it was the increase in student self-confidence that I observed over those 11 days. A majority of the 700 or so students who accompanied me over the years came back in the fall with a new spring in their step. I love that. That's why I was here. And I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the invaluable assistance of Atlas Stepanek and David Goins during the last 10 or so years that I directed these trips. So please allow me a final public trip down memory lane, as I hope this elicits some fond memories for at least some of you. Beating the Dow, that's Dow on wheels, to storms was great, but does anyone remember the biggest ball of twine? Yes. or Carhenge, or the Ronald Reagan missile site, or the encounter in the Iowa hotel basement bar. This is what I don't mean to keep you here too long, but there was a basement bar in this hotel we stayed in. Unbeknownst to us, we went down there. There was a little drink coupon on our beds when we came in. We went down there, and at the bar there was one person, and this person turned to us when we came in and asked where we were from, and I said Valparaiso University. He said, "Do you know Alan Hari?" He was the president at the time.
Oh my God.
He said, "I used to date his daughter." The next 2 hours were the most interesting conversation I've ever had in my life. Palo Duro Canyon, the Jolly Green Giant, late night story time with Bart. Lake McConaughey, and by the way, how do you spell Ogallala? Mears Burgers. I got a few more. Open the trunk before my balls fall out. Don't ask. Pancake House, Hooker, Oklahoma. 2-hour morning briefings that were supposed to be 20 minutes. Ruck Me Amadeus. We had an entire trip with a Ruck model. We were so bored, we started putting together all these Ruck sayings, and there was Ruck Me Amadeus, go ruck yourself. Between a ruck and a hard place, it was on and on and on and on. We had a 20-person hotel poker game one night, complete with betting. We took over the entire hotel breakfast bar. One of our students had a video camera, and they videotaped it, so somewhere out there there's a videotape. They threatened to hold it over my head. The Twister Museum, the Corn Palace. This will go back some years. Calling Tenley or the Weather Center for an SPC update. Nothing was funnier than having my wife try to explain what the Storm Prediction Center maps look like. How about eat beef, get slim?
Yes.
Cumulus pancakes or cumulus nodulatus. How about the High Plains Walmart bag? You remember that one? When we get toward close to Colorado and the elevations were getting higher, I would tell the newbies to put a Walmart bag over their head in case their ears exploded. I would have been so fired. How about when we crossed time zone borders? Since there were a lot of students that never had left this time zone, I told them it was really unique because when you cross a time zone, the sun would jump up. And you should try to watch it because pizza place in Lusk, Oklahoma. I'm sorry, Lusk, Wyoming, rather. Flaming Pineapples. Our nickname for police with their lights on. Jiffy Burger. Cadillac Ranch. This one's Adam's favorite. Bone-picking vultures. The creepy metal yard ornaments in Adrian, Texas. The I-80 truck stop and museum. The Wilson Candy Kitchen. Ian Lee's incredible 1980s music trivia knowledge. Hot and cold water towers in Pratt, Kansas. A certain Botswanian student, we had 4 students here from Botswana at one time. This one certain student, when we were on the trip, would always try and pick up Sports Illustrated for Women. It was a magazine at the time, and we'd ask him why, and he said, because there were pictures of women. Funniest thing I ever saw. Dennis Fleck, one of our great students from the past. I remember driving with the group from New Mexico up into Colorado, and if you've been in southeast Colorado, it's pretty much flat as a board except for 2 buttes. So anyway, we crossed the border. Dennis gets on the CB and says, "This is Colorado? That John Denver's sure full of shit." Dave Peterson, who has his own hospital wing in Valentine, Nebraska, after, as I recall, we had stopped for Pizza Hut buffet, which was, in retrospect, never a particularly great idea. But we stopped for a Pizza Hut buffet, and I think Dave, if I remember right, ordered a cheese pizza. He was the only one that ate the cheese pizza. And about 2 or 3 hours later, when it was about 100 degrees or thereabouts, he started getting sick. And we had to stop about every hour or 2 hours for Dave to lighten his mass. And later that evening, we started to get some great storms. And the final time he got sick, we pulled over, and unbeknownst to him, because it was dark, it was thunder and lightning, it was dark, he got tangled in barbed wire. And he still has the scars. So I remember taking, having the group take him to the Valentine, Nebraska hospital, which was a small hospital. We had to call the doctor off his ranch to come in, and we came back, I don't know, it was next year, 2 years, whatever it is, and they truly had a new wing. And we figured it's the Dave Peterson. Our redesign of Waukeeta, Oklahoma, which has already been alluded to, and of course the Trip t-shirt design process and quotes. I realized a couple of years ago that it was time to pass the torch to a new generation of folks and their new ideas and dreams. Tenley's dad would say that you can always make more money, but you can't make more time. Wise words that I've chosen to heed. In closing, I want to thank you all for being here, for sharing a meal, and for sharing memories. I have a great deal of pride in what has been accomplished, but most importantly, most notably, is by the students who have earned everything they've gotten. Keep up the great work, and God bless all of you.